the nature of politics is a full contact sport. At some point, the hits come, the blows come, and unfortunately, those very quiet, good things you do don't always make the headlines. It's when the politician takes the bribes or when they do something that's inappropriate that makes the news. So I would just say, as people who believe in our democracy, let's still believe there are good people doing this for the right reasons.
Keisha Lance Bottoms, so down to earth. She's the former mayor of Atlanta, a former White House senior advisor, and current gubernatorial candidate for the state of Georgia. Though when she sat down with us, she hadn't officially announced her candidacy. We went beyond those titles and headlines, and we spoke to Keisha. She's fiercely private and protective when it comes to her family, especially her children. And she has such unwavering hope. We talked about those consuming news cycles and how she takes in what's going on in the world, and why we must all be grounded in resilience and action. Enjoy the conversation.
So this will be interesting. It won't really matter for people who are just listening, but for people who watch on YouTube, they'll probably notice that we have yet another set.
Another set, which I like.
You know what? I like this. The other ones with the chairs.
Yeah.
I would see shots and, my gut was kind of.
Right. It was always like a show it to me before you go to the shop because I got to see what's going on.
But now that I'm getting rid of dad bod, I kind of want the, we'll be like,
you working it out.
So we'll be hiding.
Right. And we love this especially because of the shoes, right? We can wear sneakers. Like, we're not forced to wear heels or anything like that.
Well, I like this set, but I saw you had a Spelman mug. Morehouse mug. I didn't see a FAMU mug. That's what I was missing.
I think it's being washed, right?
It's
okay, all right.
It's in the dishwasher. Dishwasher is
well, okay. Then the set will be complete.
Oh my goodness! You know what? We were talking in the green room, and you were saying that you don't want to watch the news, but you have to, right? It really is like a bad car accident. But especially in your position, you have to watch the news. But it is one of those things where I'm sure as someone who has had an office in the West Wing, that you must want to jump through that TV.
I do. And you can't turn it off because in this time, ignorance is not bliss. You have to be informed. But by way of example, so when I was mayor of Atlanta, I would always check the news before I posted anything on social media because, of course, I didn't want to be insensitive to posting something light and something heavy was going on in the world. So yesterday, I was out all day, went to my daughter's track meet, got home, and I posted something about the weather in Atlanta and how spring was gone and everything had changed. And then I turned on the news and the education department is gone. And I thought, well, maybe this wasn't the day to post about spring disappearing in Atlanta. But that's, I remember this again from the first term of this guy. Things happen so quickly that even when you are away from the news for an hour, the whole world changes.
Absolutely.
But we also have to protect our peace.
No, we do. Right. But you're like, you turn on the news at one time, you turn it off, your loans have tripled, right? And that's what I'm hearing about these student loans. I know a lot has to take place before something is actually shut down, but these are huge things happening at just the writing of a signature. Swipe of a pen. Yeah.
Disruption and chaos.
Yeah.
And at some point, again, back to protecting our energy, right? Because I used to be addicted to MSNBC. It was an addiction. Like my daughter would come downstairs and like, Papa, turn the TV off.
Now, was this mostly during COVID or even before that?
It was before that.
Really?
Yeah, it was during this guy's first administration that I stopped. Because I just realized it's taking too much of my energy. It's draining me. It's keeping me in like this dark space, this low vibration space. And I'm of the approach now. If it's something big enough, I'm going to hear about it.
That's
right?
true.
But for me, like when I go through my timeline is littered with, so much of this information that one is not going to, affect my day to day, right? And it does more draining of my energy because we want to be informed. We want to be informed, but I'm realizing I don't have to be informed on every single thing. Not putting sticking my head in the sand, but it's finding that balance.
I do need to know if eggs are going up from $4 to $12. That I need. Well,
all you
I need to know.
You just go to the grocery store and
before I get there, I'm gonna need to know.
I am a person. I sleep with the lights off. I don't like any sound. I sleep with the mask on, complete blackout. I have been sleeping with my television on the news because I've been so afraid that I'm going to miss something. So if I wake up at 1 a.m. or 2 a.m., I want to see what's happening. That's not healthy. Sure. And even as you talked about protecting the vibration and the energy, but this is like the black hole we've been sucked into. And I know it's not healthy and I'm still doing it, but I'm so afraid that I'm going to miss something. And, I remind people because people will often ask me, what are we going to do and how are we going to get through this? And I have to remind myself what I remind other people. Like, we've been through this before. We're not the first generation that's been through some really tough stuff. And we have survived. But we've survived, again, by protecting our peace, by being of sound mind, for me, it's reminding myself God is still on the throne. No matter who's in the White House, no matter who's governor, who's mayor, any of those other things, God is still on the throne. And so tonight, I'm going to turn my television off and I'm going to have a good night's sleep because even saying it out loud, I'm like, that's pretty crazy. That's what I'm now doing.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah.
I'm wondering though, yes, protect yourself, the peace, but with the same token, all the way up to the Supreme Court, and I don't mean to get all politicky, but it's like the no's that keep happening. And when you look up at the Supreme Court and the makeup of it, the things that will eventually go up there one day, we know how it's going to turn out. And that's where I think a lot of people are stuck because you're right. We've got the history. We've got what it takes to get through anything. But boy, these cards look very, very different.
I'm not going to count the Supreme Court out either. And, I'm an optimist. But when you look at this call for judges to be impeached, you're stepping on toes. Sure. And we saw that Supreme Court Justice John Roberts even push back, saying we're getting into dangerous territory. So I don't know. And democracies are fragile, and we know this from looking at other places around the world. But I still believe that there are some good people. They may be silent right now, but there are people with courage and people who believe that this country and this democracy is stronger and bigger than one person. And I still believe that they're going to show up somewhere. Maybe it's in the Supreme Court, maybe it's not, but my hope springs eternal.
Well, speaking of that silence, there is in these conversations I'm having amongst, people I know, when we talk about, what the administration is now, where are the democratic voices, right? Because there's so much silence, yes. Right? Like, there's a philosophy against amongst my people is the Republicans didn't win the election. The Democrats lost the election, right? So there is a sense of not having a lot of faith in what's happening on the Democratic side. there's this sense that there'll never be another Democratic president, because of the way the system is being rigged. So I know I'm having a hard time trying to help restore faith in what's happening with the Democratic Party and even in politicians in general.
Yeah.
Are there any direction that you can point us in terms of restoring that faith?
So it's funny you would bring this up. I've had this conversation with my husband multiple times. He said, "Where are the Democrats? Where are the Democrats?" I said, "Well, you're a Democrat. Where are you?" And we've talked about, even in the context of the civil rights movement, there were times when people went out and they marched and they were visible, and there were other times when they went inside and they planned. And they were quiet in their planning. And I understand the frustration. I believe that we are somewhere in between. We've got very vocal voices. We've got Pritzker, Governor Pritzker in Illinois. We have Jasmine Crockett, very outwardly, sounding the alarm. And then there are people, I believe, many of our congressional leaders are planning and they are fighting it out in the courts. And I think somewhere in the middle is going to give everyone a sense of relief and comfort in knowing that there is a plan. I think what's been shocking to so many people, Donald Trump said what he would do. To his credit, he's stuck with his word.
He put it in a book.
He put it Project 25.
Oh, the book he didn't know about.
Exactly. He didn't know about that, though.
And now he's put these people inside of government. The speed at which it's been able to be done has been surprising to a lot of people. But I would just remind people, for all of us, like the power is in us. If it's not the Democratic Party that's giving you the comfort, like what is that thing that you can do? And reminding people it's not just about who's in Congress. It's not just about who's in the White House. We have local elections. We have local leadership. I go back to the last time this guy was in the White House. I remember sitting around with my team when the governor had gone off the rails, White House had gone off the rails. And I said, God bless the child who's got his own. We got to figure this out by ourselves. And some of our best work came in the midst of that chaos. So if we can't impact what's happening in the White House, if we can't impact what's happening in Congress, what can we impact at the local and state level?
That's true.
What can we call on our leaders to do? And that's the thing that we all have to answer for ourselves. So I go back to asking my husband, well, what do you think we should do? What do you think we can do? And see what that answer is for all of us.
Hey, comrades, if you are enjoying the episode, join the conversation. Like, subscribe, leave a comment below. Don't get yourself blocked. Keep it clean.
I think it's going so fast that it's also going to crash just as hard because we don't know what's going on behind closed doors, but we know that all the conversations that are being held at the White House or on, congressional floors, we know they're not all, what we see in the news, that everything is just wonderful. And all the executive orders are being, not with the characters that are there. That's impossible. That's impossible. So I think also time will help us in all of it to just be patient with what's going on because we really don't know. You talked earlier about posting, about the weather. And then all of a sudden, the education department was imploding. And I think that the media is just a really big part of it too, and kind of shaping what we actually see. And so I think that's just I would imagine for you, you just have to consider that every single moment.
Yeah, I do. And I have 3 teenagers and a 22-year-old in my household. So I'm also very cognizant of how people receive information. They've never seen me on CNN or MSNBC. They don't even have cable boxes in their room. They listen to podcasts. They watch YouTube. They are on TikTok and all these other places that people get information. And so for me, I'm always trying to sort out what's real, what's not, what's loud, what's important. And again, finding my space where, what can I do about it all? Because there's always information. There's misinformation, disinformation. What's the reality of this? So even when you see the president signing these executive orders, sometimes it's just fluff. Mm-hmm. It's just him making the news, being seen doing something. For example, when he fired me, supposedly, at 1:30 a.m., first day of going into his first day as president, I'd already resigned. That's fluff. That was just let me put something out to make it look like I did something when he did nothing at all. So it's great to have trusted places like this where you can have conversations with sane people. And I think as we get our news and as we try and make sense of all of this, what's that trusted place and space where you know that you're getting something that's accurate and it's not just fluff?
Sure. I mean, so much, but I think that's the hard part because so much of our media has become fluff.
Yeah,
right? So much.
So you have to decipher.
So many. Yeah, and it's so much to sift through. But taking the news out of it and just going back to the power that we have, right? Because we're conditioned to always think about presidential elections, right? And we don't really think about the local elections as much. But from a very practical standpoint, most people don't even know who their local officials are.
No.
And don't even know what the positions are to look for to see who to vote for. What would be local positions that people need to know about that would actually make a difference? Like if we can't make the difference as big of a difference as we want at the presidential level, what are the positions we should be looking at that will affect our communities?
Yeah. So there are layers to this. So on a local level, you're looking at who's your school board representative.
Why does that matter?
Why it matters. I was just out looking at a school yesterday, and I was struck by the beauty of this campus and the resources of this campus compared to the resources on my side of town. Well, there's a school board, there's a superintendent making those decisions. Who gets what? Who gets the certain program? Who gets the nice football field? All those things, those decisions, those budgets are decided by your local school board members, who then appoints a superintendent who helps make decisions about what schools get what resources. Then you've got your city council members and your county commission members making decisions. How are your tax dollars being spent? Then at the state level, you have your members of the Senate, the member of the House. So when we look at, and again, I tie this back into the national level, your state House and Senate members are making decisions on congressional maps. How is your representative chosen to represent a particular area? And then when you begin to stack these maps in a certain way, then you may or may not get the representation that you deserve in Congress. So it all builds on each other. And it all matters. And most local places have an opportunity for people to show up and be heard and speak in public comment. And I would even venture to say, I mean, we hear this comment a lot. All politics are local. They really are.
They really are.
When you drive down the street and your street's not paved,
that's right.
That's your local leadership responsible for that. Your school's not getting the resources they need. That's your local elected official, usually.
And it's great training ground for somebody who wants to get into politics.
Yeah.
I mean, that's really, like you said, it just builds on top of each other.
Yes. Even judges, in Georgia are elected.
That's right. So this politics, and it's not like that in every state. The other thing is that even with the school board, though, it can get pretty thick and racy. I mean, there are a lot of people going for school board and the votes and the campaigns. People are knocking on doors. I know when I was growing up, and my dad was on the school board, and, so I saw him go through the process. But it is a lot of people who are interested in that, and then they build, like you said.
Yes.
Then all of a sudden, they're a state senator, and then before you know it, they're running for Congress for, the United States of America, and then all the way up. But it's a great training ground to figure out, how do I do politics locally?
Yes.
Because like you said, it is all locally anyway.
Yes.
It's funny because one of the producers, he was telling me he has a shirt that says, Keisha is my mayor.
I love that. Thank you very much.
and I said, you know what? I love that too, because it kind of really speaks to kind of the local that you really need to get down to for someone to have a shirt to say, you know what? That's Keisha. That's Keisha to me.
Yeah. And again, your local leaders make decisions 9 times out of 10 that impact your lives on a day-to-day basis, or has more impact than your member of Congress or whomever is in the White House. I know it feels louder oftentimes, but that local representation is usually what impacts your day-to-day life.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, absolutely. Like you said, from roads to schools,
yes,
to, what is my child reading in the school system,
yes,
to, how Halloween is going to play out. Really, it's very simple, but it's stuff that people are concerned about when those Halloween costumes aren't looking the way that they want them to.
When you pay your taxes, how are your tax dollars spent at the local level? 50% going to public safety, whatever's going to public health, what's going to our schools, all that's decided at the local level.
Yeah.
So what happens? I will always assume that people go into politics with good intentions.
Yeah.
Right. But the game is the game, right? Like at what point does so a person who goes in with great intentions, they become a politician, they're in this political game. I'm always curious, at what point do those good intentions get sacrificed to stay in the game?
He's trying to say, when do they start accepting the bribes?
Because again, I'm coming from, and again, I'm and the reason I'm having these conversations because these are conversations that I'm having with people. And especially for people who look at politics and all politicians as corrupt. Again, I believe that, most people go into it with the good intentions, but because politics is what it is, and the very nature of politics is you do this for me, I do this for you. How does, and maybe it's not a question that has a specific answer, but I'm just always curious, how in the journey, at what point, again,
do
the good intentions get compromised? In the sake of politics, if that makes sense.
So I understand the question and I respect the sentiment behind it. I do think it's kind of loaded with assumptions.
Sure.
That all politicians go off the rails. I think unfortunately, and I can speak for myself, you do go in with this pure heart and I'm going to go in and I'm going to change the world and I'm going to make it better. And they may not always get the attention and the work may not always get the attention, but it's still being done. And the ability to vote people out, the ability to make a change comes every few years. So, and I'll give again, giving myself as an example, when I made the decision not to run for mayor of Atlanta again, it was because I felt my season was over in that space, and that for Atlanta to get the best work, it was time to pass the baton on. Didn't mean that I couldn't do it, but it meant personally, I knew that season was over and it was time for me to step back from that space. Now, I'm, not saying I'm like Mother Teresa and I deserve a crown for that, but I do think it would be great if more people did that self-assessment.
Mm-hmm.
At what point have I done the things that I set out to do? At what point is it time to pass the baton on and allow someone else to continue this work? That's what I did, because I always felt like Atlanta deserved the best of whatever someone had to give. And for me, it was, all right, I've completed this leg of the race. I'm going to pass this baton on to someone else. And whether that's done through us asking that our elected officials have term limits. In Atlanta, you can serve 2 terms as mayor. I decided to serve 1. Congress, you can serve forever until you literally are rolled out on a gurney. Maybe we need to have that conversation. Do we want people to have term limits? Do we want the opportunity to vote more often on certain offices? Or do we want them to be able to serve longer terms to get better work out of them? Again, this goes back to like this, it's our democracy. So we collectively get to make these rules and call on people to do better.
And we have a vote. And
we have a vote.
Use it wisely.
Some elected officials, you get to vote every 2 years. Some it's every 4. Some it's every 6.
But you mentioned the job, and that I think that happens at every job, that you have somebody who might be there just too long. What's Sammy doing? Nobody knows what Sammy's doing in that department, but he's been here so long, no one's going to bother him. But you mentioned your husband a couple of times, and I would imagine that those conversations just at home to say, okay, because you pass the baton collectively as a family, right? Yes. It's not just you. And I would imagine those conversations had to be very interesting.
Oh yeah,
take me there.
We're both lawyers, so they can get very spirited. Nobody wants to back down. Nobody wants to lose the fight. But also, just it's great to have somebody else just to talk things through, and he brings a different perspective than I have, because I was an elected official for 12 years. So in some ways, my thought process may be lean a little too much to thinking of, the inside part of it. And it's nothing like, your husband and your kids talking to you about the rest of the world while you're thinking about what's happening in your little bubble. So yeah, it's always spicy.
I like that word.
It's
spicy.
Always spicy.
Where do you guys fall in meritocracy, or the lie of meritocracy has been a big conversation amongst a bunch of people that I talk to.
Who do you talk to?
You're saying this.
People.
Pull out your phone.
I got a bunch of text threads with different groups of people. Like most of my friends are not in the business, not in the industry, and have no desire to be in the industry. So I love to, to have conversations with civilians, right?
Regular people.
People who don't have, who don't feel the need to be politically correct in our conversations, and
right.
But meritocracy has really come up a lot, and one of my threads, there's a brother there who's very conservative, and very right leaning. And, we're having these conversations about, all of the DEI being rolled back. And he kept bringing up this idea of we should do, and this is a brother, by the way, that we should do away with DEI because we're at a point now where race and gender should not come into play in any of these conversations.
It shouldn't.
And everyone, right, sure, right. And everyone just be, everything just be based on the person's merit. So we got this whole conversation about how meritocracy, at least from my perspective, and I'm opening up to the table, from my perspective, the idea of meritocracy, there's a great idea, but in reality, it's a lie because there's so much that goes into individual accomplishments, right? So I was just thinking about that because as we're thinking about politics, and again, people, the good people, right? The people going with good intentions, the people who can hold on to those values are not necessarily the ones who succeed or who can go up the ladder, who can ascend in the political game because they're holding on to those values, if you will.
And what I would say is you think about how the word woke was hijacked.
Yeah.
We say, stay woke, stay woke. Yeah. And in some way, that was hijacked and became this dirty word. Well, it's the same with DEI. When you talk about DEI, nobody wants to have a DEI program because it's diversity, equity, and inclusion. So if all of our spaces were open to diverse voices, and if they were equitable and if they were inclusive, then we wouldn't have to have a DEI program. But I just remind people, it's not about saying, I choose you because you are a Black man or you are a Black woman over someone. It's saying, I'm giving you the same opportunity to compete. I'm opening the door, providing you with resources to the extent that you don't get to sit at this table or go into these rooms, that you have an opportunity on your own merits to compete. Now, if someone is in a space they shouldn't be in, it's kind of like when you lie on your resume and then you show up, you're like, well, where's the person on the paper? That didn't do anyone any good. But you want to give people the opportunity to compete on a level playing field. And unfortunately, in this country, a lot of our institutions haven't given people that opportunity. A lot of it is just lack of exposure. So I went to Florida A&M undergrad, graduated from Atlanta Public Schools. I remember there was a program when I came out of college that you could get a scholarship to attend Harvard, Columbia, all these places if you had a certain GPA. My exposure was so limited, I didn't even apply for the scholarship. I'd never been exposed to anyone who had attended an Ivy League school. So what did I choose? Georgia State University. Great experience. Met my husband. Great experience. But the point being, my lack of exposure didn't even allow me to consider an Ivy League education. So when we talk about DEI programs, you are exposing people to things that they otherwise may not have been exposed to. You're saying, I am allowing you the opportunity to compete in this space that you otherwise may not have had. And I'm giving you these tools to allow you to succeed while you are in this space. That is not a dirty word. And I remind people, it's not just about Black and brown people. White women have been huge beneficiaries
They're the ones
of DEI programs. LGBTQ community, huge beneficiaries of DEI programs. Those in the disabled community.
That's right.
It's about being diverse. It's about being equitable. It's about being inclusive.
So how did Black people become the face of DEI?
Because they've made it a dirty word. They're like, this is about that Black man taking your job.
Right.
And the unfortunate part about that, for those who are in these spaces, now it's like, oh, you're only here because. We just saw that the Department of Defense has scrubbed its website.
Oh, my
I think
goodness.
they put it back now, but
They said they put it back, but
Jackie Robinson.
Yeah.
And with the words DEI at the beginning. So it's become a dirty word because they made it a dirty word, and we are now accepting it as a dirty word. Mm-hmm. And I say we reclaim our word.
Yeah. Comrades, if you're enjoying this episode, join the conversation and make sure to like, subscribe, and comment below. Nah.
Yeah.
Well, I would like to say specifically to the Jackie Robinson point, and maybe by the time this airs, it would have really been restored. But I actually looked up, because I saw it on social media, and I was like, hey, well, before I repost this, let me go Google, let me do my due diligence. So there are all these posts that said that his biography was restored on the website, but as of right now, as of this recording, this episode, it has not been put back. They put his name back, but they did not put his whole story.
I think anything that is Black these days becomes DEI. I don't know if I was telling you or someone on the team that we were renting out a facility for an event. The event does happen to have R&B people, so you are more than likely going to get a Black crowd. And the place where we were renting was a college. And they said, we're just concerned about the DEI component of it. And I thought,
wow.
What DEI component of it? And by the way, this was a Black man who was telling me, he was just like, I'm letting you know, this is how the school is going to be looking at it. And I said, I never even thought about it being a DEI event. He said, well, that's how it's going to be translated because these universities have been losing so much money. They don't want to be anywhere near Black folk. Right, I said, well, that's a major problem.
Everything Black becomes DEI.
Everything Black becomes DEI. And as you said, it's not just about Black. It's about so many things.
And the scariest thing is the way we are internalizing it. That we as a people are now afraid in many ways, often of our own shadows. And, let's look at history. How do dictators operate? In words of Audre Lorde, revolution is not a one-time event. This has not been a one-time thing. This has been planning. This has been getting into our consciousness, our subconsciousness. This is invading our spaces, whether it's in the barbershop, the beauty salon. It's been years and years and years of eroding those things that we know to be true. There's nothing wrong with Black people renting a space. But now someone's concerned that it's viewed as DEI. There's nothing wrong with the word DEI. There's nothing wrong with talking about Jackie Robinson's service to the Army during World War II. But it is this drumbeat of erosion.
Sure. But we know, so what you're saying, we know that, right? But, so again, when we talk about the power that we have, right? So let's say, they don't restore Jackie Robinson's full biography on the site.
Yeah.
I just read that the Arlington Cemetery have scrubbed stories of Black soldiers.
Sure.
So in cases like that, what do we do? Do we petition? Do we march? So there's so much talk about the power that we have, but in realistic, practical cases, how do we use that power to just restore those two?
Sure.
Those two really grievances, not the word I'm looking for, but
just those issues.
Let's just take those two scenarios.
Yeah. Well, it may be that we won't have it restored over the next 3.5 years. It may be the website won't go up, but it doesn't mean that you can't talk to kids at school or in your church, or you can't post about it on your social media page, or we can't do those things that we used to do when we would come together as community.
Right.
So they may not be able to get the book in the library. They may not be able to see it at Arlington Cemetery. But we can still have those conversations and making sure that our children know, that the people in the barbershop know, that we're flooding the zone with all these things that actually are important. I think I was sharing a story with someone. many years, I'd sit in church and I had these great ministers. I could go to church on Sunday. I could get the word.
All right.
And then I'd come back next Sunday.
Okay.
Right? And then I had a minister who I couldn't always trust what he was giving me. So I got into Bible studies and I started reading the Bible for myself because I couldn't always trust his information. So I think in many ways, that's like the space we're in. We have been in this kind of safe space where we could just kind of trust that our history was being preserved and our stories being told. Well, we can't trust that anymore.
Right.
So we got to go back to telling our stories ourselves, making sure we're putting out our own information, making sure that we're having these conversations and we're not just throwing up our hands in despair. I gave this analogy to someone I was talking to this week. I said, it's kind of like a prize fighter. Fighter goes in the ring, they fight, and then they sit down and they take a rest in between. Doesn't mean that we can all rely on one person or one group to do it at all times. Maybe you got to go in, you got to fight your round, then you step back and you take a break while you go in and you fight the next one. But I think if we all do it intentionally and collectively, our stories and our history will not be erased. Think about who we are in this country as a people. We know our stories because of oral history.
That's true.
This is an attempt to erase who we are and all that we have been. And it is up to us to tell and own our stories because we, once again, can't depend on anybody else to do it.
No, we can't. We can't. I think people are looking and perhaps waiting for a leader. And those days are gone, right? I mean, we have so many different things that we're all fighting for individually. It's all very different. We can't just wait for that one leader to say, let's do the boycott or let's not do this. It's not going to happen that way. It's going to happen, as you said, more organically. Like you were asking your husband, well, what are you going to do? Well, you use your mouthpiece or use whatever it is to do what you're supposed to do. But we are past, I think, that waiting for that one leader to have anything and waiting for one person to do anything, to lead the masses.
Yeah. There used to be a time there was one place we go for all of our information. At some point, all the people turned on Walter Cronkite. They got all their news. And then we all turned on Oprah Winfrey and we understood, what was happening outside of the news. Now there's so many places to get information. And again, our leaders may not come in the shape or form that we expect, but I truly believe our ability to lead is within all of us. And it's our responsibility. And if there's one person who rises to the top, then so be it. But in the meanwhile, let's all go out and do all the things that we can do and that we know need to be done and hold the line until this country rights itself and we have the ability to go back out in this great democracy and get it right with the power of the vote.
You mentioned how we all used to go to Walter Cronkite and Oprah. I won't mention the magazine, but I was at the airport. Remember we used to read magazines?
Jet Magazine, Ebony Magazine, Time Magazine.
And so I'm at the airport yesterday and I said, you know what? I'm going to support this magazine, this Black magazine. I picked it up. It was so thin. I had to put it back. Wow. I had to put it back. Yes. But you're right. Gone are those days where, we have these media outlets, especially in the Black community, that are really doing their thing in terms of getting information out to the masses. I think that social media has trumped that. I think the way that we use social media and make people kind of get in their, algorithms. I know you knew that. Look, it'll get $10 every time I say that, right? But because people just like to be kind of sucked into something. And then while we're sucked in, guess what? Someone's doing something really quietly. While the Teslas are on the front of the White House, something else is happening inside, right? That we are not, we don't know about and we're not worried about right now.
The distractions.
Yeah, the distractions.
Before we go, there is there's something on social media called the Digital Green Book. I don't know if you guys have heard about that.
No, what's that?
So it's the Digital Green Book, and they are a source to combat a lot of the disinformation that we get across social media. So the digital green book is something, is a resource that everyone should know about, to check resources.
So you're saying that like in a situation when you might want to find out if something is false or fake news type of thing? Okay.
Well, I'm going to check it out because right now my algorithm's full of braided hairstyles and puppies.
Girl, you got that right.
So yes, I would.
Because if you do the crochet this way, it won't show the what?
Yeah.
Exactly.
Well, I think I think there is a proactive effort that I'm realizing now that we all need to think about, not just the three of us, but, even listeners, find ways to expose people to the power that we have, again, in practical terms.
Yeah.
Because we always hear, and it always sounds kind of esoteric and motivationally, motivation-y, that, you've got this power, so we have to use our power. There's power in numbers, and we as people have power. But I think to go beyond just that statement, I think we all need to do a better job proactively exposing people to what the power actually is.
Yeah. And just exposing ourselves in general. I mean, how many trans people, disabled people, Native Americans, do we all know? Do you know what I mean? How many do we interact with on any given day? Do we know our neighbors? Remember the time we were growing up when we used to know our neighbors? So I think that that's a big part of it too, because I think people are just not exposed, which is why they're so afraid of all of the groups that are in the DEI categories.
Well, and I'll just say this again, this power of one. I think about when I made the decision to go to college, where I went to college. It was because there was a woman, Dr. Lorraine Brown, who would come into my mother's hair salon. And she talked to me about going to FAMU. It changed my life. There is this power, even we may not have the microphone or the megaphone, but even that power to influence and have these impactful conversations, even if it's just with one person. When I would campaign, I would always say the streets don't lie. You could feel when people, what they were talking about and what mattered to them just by talking to somebody in the grocery store or in the barbershop or in the doctor's office. So while this is an amazing platform and those, but I just remind you, those one-on-one interactions can be just as impactful. And 1 + 1 = 2, and then it expands, and that's the power that we all have. So don't miss those opportunities to have those one-on-one interactions in these places that may not seem that are magnified places, but they can still just be just as impactful in our communities.
Hey, comrades. Come join us on our Patreon page.
Where you can get behind-the-scenes footage, discounts on merchandise, and exclusive content.
We'll see you there.
Not all hood.